Was just kind of perusing online here, and I've seen a number of articles talking about that ballistic missile strike in the Ukraine a few days ago, and how virtually no damage was done. But you also haven't seen any photographs or any evidence of what happened. I found an interesting opinion editorial here in the Eurasian Times. Embarrassingly little damage. Russian hypersonic Oreshnik missile proved a dud, report claims. Fiction or fact? A Reuters report quoting two senior Ukrainian government sources claims that the Russian Oreshnik missile attack in Dnipro caused limited damage. One of the sources said the missile was carrying dummy warheads and described the damage caused as quite small. The second source said in this case, the missile, without explosives. There were no types of explosives like we expected. There was something, but it wasn't huge. Quoting unnamed experts, the report suggests that Russian forces left out explosives from the vehicles enclosed in the heat-protected re-entry vehicle to create space for instruments used to evaluate the missile's performance during testing. The report concludes that the missile attack was merely a warning to the West and quotes the director of the U.S. government-funded Institute of International Studies in California, derisively saying, "I would say it was an incredibly expensive way to deliver what is probably not that much destruction." Let's look at the Reuters report in detail to ascertain its veracity. This goes through and kind of explains what hypersonic vehicles actually are, what they do, and essentially goes through that an explosive device isn't really necessary. Ask a fighter pilot who's experienced a small bird strike flying at 800 kilometers per hour, as did the author flying a Jaguar in the IAF. He will tell you how much damage can result from mere flesh and bone striking metal at that speed. And if the bird strikes an engine compressor blades, the pilot's only way back to Mother Earth is suspended under a parachute canopy. In the case of the Oreshnik, metal, possibly tungsten, flying at nearly 11,000 kilometers an hour struck the targets. There were 36 impact points. It's surprising that Reuters' Ukrainian sources could not show a single photograph of even one impact point. That is odd, isn't it? It is odd that you haven't seen a single photograph of anything. There can be little doubt that the Reuters report is disinformation. I think that's obvious. You can tell just merely from the speed of the objects coming in that something happened. Even if it was just steel duds, something happened. But this goes on to suggest something that is very distinctly possible. To be effective, the falsehood in disinformation has to be laced around incontrovertible facts, and I'm quoting from the CIA playbook. What the second source quoted by Reuters said more or less the incontrovertible truth. In this case, the missile, without explosives. There were no types of explosives that we expected. There was something, but it was not huge. The above statements are correct, considering that we have discussed the preceding paragraphs. A metallic object traveling at Mach 10 is unlikely to create a telltale crater. Video recording of the Oreshnik strike showed no explosions. No satellite images of the warhead impacts have been published. The disinformation laced around the above incontrovertible truth is that the merely was missile a test caused little damage. If the Russian intent was to merely test the missile, they could have done so at one of their several test ranges. The communication link between the hypothetical instrumentation and the RV and launch monitoring sites would have been far more reliable. Why would the Russians reveal the characteristics of a missile and some of the technology that went into it by doing a test over Ukrainian territory? That makes no sense. If the intent was merely to send a message to the West, why didn't the Russians symbolically target Ukraine's parliament, which had been largely unoccupied at the time of the attack? Very good question. And this I think, kind of really says it. Open source evidence suggests that Russian forces successfully attacked a military-industrial facility in the city of Dnipro. Specifically, the attack was aimed at the Pivdenmash facility known by the Russians as Uzmash, which manufactures missiles and other armaments. What it does say in this article, which I of course will link here, is that a lot of those facilities are underground. And we'll just go back to one more section of this. Several decades ago, an IAF MiG-21 flying at Mach 1 impacted farmland in Punjab in a vertical dive. It left no large crater at the point of impact. The aircraft simply disappeared. I believe the IAF could not recover any wreckage because it had penetrated deep underground. Had an underground facility existed at the point of impact, it would have been completely destroyed. 36 sets of tungsten rods impacting at Mach 10 would not leave the target's underground facilities intact. I think that's absolutely the key point to that. That is absolutely the key point to that. We're talking about a different level of technology here. Let's quickly show the impacts. Once again, look at the speeds. This is not sped up. These are hypersonic speeds. I agree. You don't see large explosions. That's absolutely true. That's absolutely true. I found a video kind of explaining the physics of this extremely well. And this is in regards to a separate weapons program, but using the same physics, but probably on a smaller scale. It's an interesting video. I hope you enjoy.
I would posit the following definition: a tool designed to multiply or direct force for the purpose of attacking another. All weapons on Earth seek to take force and apply it in such a way that its application becomes greater than an unaided action. As Archimedes reportedly said, "Give me a lever long enough and a fulcrum on which to place it, and I'll move the world." The club multiplies force, enabling a more effective strike for the same energy expended. The bow and arrow delivers energy via the drawing of a string, the lethal distance far exceeding the length of the draw. The firearm uses combined mechanical and chemical energy to multiply a simple trigger pull into an event that can kill from hundreds of yards away. The most effective weapons are those which take the most advantage of the forces in our universe, for the benefit of the user. In this case, we're talking about a universal and nearly inescapable force: gravity. Gravity constantly exerts its force on all earthbound objects, pulling them tightly to the planet. If that force could be harvested, an extremely efficient weapon system could be created. This is the idea behind the concept of kinetic bombardment. Weaponry that gains all of its energy from kinetic impact can cause incredible damage without the effects of explosive, biological, or nuclear weapons. Robert Heinlein's book, The Moon is a Harsh Mistress, demonstrates a hypothetical example of this. A lunar prison colony decides to declare and fight for its independence from the governments of Earth. Equipped with an interplanetary launch system to send cargo back and forth, the people of Luna turn this into a platform for launching massive kinetic bombs at the Earth. The idea has actually seen military use, and not just in trebuchets and catapults. So-called lazy dog bombs are relatively small fin-stabilized projectiles made out of steel. Dropped from a passing airplane, they blanket a wide area and can do considerable damage based off of kinetic energy alone. Concrete bombs have also been used to the same effect. But perhaps the most infamous application of this idea is the concept of orbital kinetic bombardment. Sometimes referred to as rods from God, plans were drawn up in the Cold War for satellite-borne weapons utilizing kinetic projectiles. The projectiles envisioned were the size of telephone poles, roughly 20 feet long and 1 foot in diameter. These tungsten projectiles, with a mass of roughly 9 tons, are projected to be capable of reaching speeds of Mach 10 at the moment of impact, delivering energy equivalent to 11.5 tons of TNT. The projectiles imagined have a very slender aerodynamic shape with stabilizing fins to increase sectional density, reducing drag and increasing the depth at which they could be used to strike. This is a similar design concept to super-dense, high-energy kinetic rounds used in anti-tank weapons, such as the APFDS, armor-piercing, fin-stabilizing, discarding sabot round. A 2003 Air Force report refers to these as hypervelocity rod bundles, and refers to their potential future capability to strike a target anywhere in the world from space. High sectional density and kinetic energy combined with a very high attack angle would make these hypothetical rod bundles particularly suited to striking hardened and buried targets with very little chance for effective countermeasures, and without the long-term environmental damage caused by nuclear weapons. While kinetic energy weapons have been used, no form of this weapon has been tested from space, at least to public knowledge, and the application remains entirely hypothetical. One of the major obstacles to its implementation is the incredible cost of transporting such munitions into space, greatly exceeding the cost of comparatively powerful conventional explosives. Massive projectiles launched from space, stealthy and quiet, creating little signature which could alert any early warning system. Nuclear-equivalent explosions created solely from the power of Earth's gravity. Nearly impossible to hide from anywhere on or underneath the Earth. It's little wonder a concept of this kind has earned such
And there you go.
as rods from God.
Rods from God. Rods from God, except on a smaller scale, and perhaps missile deliverable now. You're still using the physics of space. The same concepts still apply. Frightening. Frightening. That's where we're at.